Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. What happens when the human race is pushed to the edge by a desperate alien species and must rely on their last gamble to save them? Let's get into the story. Arratika was always destined to be a graveyard. Its frozen landscape, sculpted by blizzards rather than rivers, was a harsh testament to nature's indifference. The Kuldari, with their armored scales and hissing speech, fit this world like a key in a lock. Humans? They bled as easily here as anywhere else in the cold-blooded cosmos. Commander Jason Jeff Ward shouldered his rifle, ignoring the way the icy wind whipped through the crude trenches his soldiers had carved into the permafrost. His gaze swept across the shattered horizon where the pale sunlight was blotted out by the smoke of burning vehicles and the churning atmosphere churned up by battle. This war wasn't about glory, it was about survival. The Kuldari, as desperate as the humans, had dug in, transforming this backwater planet into a bloody stalemate. "Commander!" shouted Ramirez, her amplified voice piercing through the howl of the wind. She knelt beside a makeshift barricade, her augmented eyes scanning the enemy position like a hawk. "They're massing again. Third push in the last hour." Jeff grimaced. The reptilians were relentless, their scaly bodies impervious to the worst the elements could throw at them. The humans had the firepower, but they lacked the sheer resilience of their enemy. The casualty reports he'd sent back to the fleet had been met with a long, cold silence. He was bleeding soldiers he couldn't afford to lose. "Incoming dropship!" Ramirez barked, her hand waving frantically at the sky. Not reinforcements, it was too small. He turned his head just in time to see a sleek black vessel pierce the clouds, its angular silhouette alien against the perpetual storm. Jeff had heard the rumors, whispers of the terrors the High Command kept in its pocket. The Beastmasters. The ship landed with surprising grace, venting steam that hissed and froze against the ice. Even through the perma-fog, Jeff could see the outline as the ramp lowered, a massive, shaggy form that dwarfed the handful of troops disembarking with it. "Commander Ward," a voice crackled through his helmet's comm. Laconic. Female. "High Command Liaison. We've been briefed on your situation." Jeff didn't bother standing on ceremony. His troops were dying out there. "I've been requesting heavier armor support for weeks. A dropship isn't—" "Not that kind of support," the liaison interrupted. "The Beastmaster unit is here. They'll break your stalemate." Jeff stared at the form that now emerged from the ship's shadows. It moved with a predator's lope, its powerful limbs dwarfing its soldier escort. Its fur was shockingly white against the ice. Huge claws tipped gleaming paws that sunk into the crust with each thunderous step. And as it came closer, he saw the eyes. Not the primal yellow you'd expect, but an unnervingly intelligent blue. They locked onto him. "Name's Avalanche, Commander." The beast's voice echoed in his helmet, surprisingly deep and laced with a growl that sent shivers down his spine. Jeff fought down a sense of unease. They were here, and he had a job to do. His orders had been clear. Support the Beastmaster. Victory at any cost. "My unit's ready," Jeff said. He gestured at the scarred battlefield. "We need to push them off that ridge, open a corridor to Firebase Echo. They have supplies we desperately need." "Won't be a problem," Avalanche rumbled. Before Jeff could ask for a strategy, the beast turned, its massive head swinging towards the enemy lines. Then came the sound that would haunt the battlefield for years to come. A roar. It echoed across the ice, cutting through the whine of gunfire and the scream of the wind. It was a sound from a forgotten age, a sound of unchained fury and absolute dominance. For a long moment, the sounds of war ceased. Both sides stared in awe at the creature now charging forward, its thunderous footfalls shattering the frozen ground. Avalanche became a storm made flesh, a force of nature unleashed upon the entrenched Kuldari. Behind him, Jeff led his troops, their shouts of fear transforming into battle cries as they witnessed the sheer, horrifying power of the Beastmaster. The Kuldari lines broke even before Avalanche reached them. Scaled reptiles that had faced down plasma fire with stoic resilience scattered as the towering bear creature tore into their ranks. Claws the size of sabers ripped through armor as easily as paper. Teeth that could crush tank treads found warm flesh. Those who dared to fire found their weapons useless. The icy fur deflected their blasts, or worse, turned them back, creating explosions of blue frost among their ranks. "Sir, the Kuldari are routed!" Ramirez called out, her voice a mix of awe and horror. "They're falling back across the entire front!" The human soldiers surged forward, seizing the opportunity the Beastmaster had carved for them. It was a slaughter, but after weeks of agonizing stalemate, it felt like a victory. A brutal, primal victory, bought with the blood and fury of a creature humans had unleashed onto an unsuspecting enemy. The chase led them to the base of the ridge and into a maze of icy canyons, an ideal kill zone for the Kuldari's ambush tactics. Avalanche charged right into it, seemingly heedless of the danger. "Avalanche, wait," Jeff shouted into the comm. "Strategic says those canyons are—" The transmission cut off, replaced by a shriek of static. Jeff cursed. He didn't have time to debate with command. Every second they hesitated, the Kuldari could regroup and counterattack. "Ramirez, take the left flank. I'm going center. Push through those canyons." He could hardly believe he was ordering his soldiers to follow a beast into a trap. He trusted Avalanche's instincts less than those of his own men. Avalanche's roar echoed through the canyon, a defiant sound answered by the hiss of Kuldari energy weapons slashing through the gloom. As they entered, Jeff saw why this place was perfect for an ambush. The sheer walls of ice offered cover and firing positions from above, making his troops easy targets. Then, the trap closed. A network of energy beams formed across a narrow passage up ahead, a glowing lattice ready to incinerate anything that moved through it. To his flanks, Kuldari warriors appeared on the ledges, their weapons trained on the trapped humans below. "This is it, Commander!" Ramirez shouted, her voice tight with fear. "We're cut off!" Jeff keyed his comm. Nothing but garbled static. He swore, realizing that the canyon walls were interfering with their transmissions. He was blind. Avalanche was blind, and his soldiers were about to die. Then, as suddenly as it had descended, the firing stopped. In the eerie silence that followed, Jeff heard footsteps crunching on ice above, not light reptilian hisses, but the heavy tread of a massive creature. He looked up, fear knotting his gut, to see Avalanche staring down at him from the ledge, a fresh Kuldari corpse dangling from its jaws. Then the beast did something he never expected. It winked. "Ambush detected," Avalanche rumbled. The voice was in his head now, not through the comm, but something different. "You can speak directly to me?" Jeff asked, his mind racing with implications. "Can't you speak directly to me?" The beast tilted its head, dropping the carcass into the shocked crowd of Kuldari below. We weren't aware. Your scientists should examine my implants more closely," Avalanche said, amusement in its voice. "Now, about that ambush." With their trap sprung, the disorganized Kuldari weren't ready for what happened next. Avalanche took command, its mental voice a clear, booming presence in Jeff's mind. "Ramirez, hold your position, cover the left flank. Private Diaz, take your squad up top, right side. Find their snipers. Commander, take a team with me. We're going straight through that energy field." Jeff was used to following orders, not having them barked by a fur-covered monstrosity, but he wasn't about to argue when his troops' lives were on the line. Even as his gut screamed it was a suicide mission, years of training kicked in. He rallied a group of his best soldiers and they followed in Avalanche's wake, pushing towards the glowing barrier. "The field's designed for heavy armor, Commander," Avalanche warned. "Your suits will offer minimal protection. Get through it fast. It'll overload in 3, 2, 1. The air crackled with electricity as the barrier surged, throwing sparks of frigid energy. Jeff gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain as he pushed through. His soldiers screamed, some collapsing under the onslaught. But just as Avalanche predicted, the field flickered and sputtered, finally overloading with a shower of blue sparks and an acrid smell of burnt circuits. The remaining Kuldari were thrown into disarray by the collapse of their trap. Avalanche surged forward, a white whirlwind of death. Jeff and his soldiers scrambled after, their weapons spitting fire. It was a chaotic, brutal fight within the confined canyon, but the element of surprise in Avalanche's raw power quickly shattered the Kuldari's resistance. When the last echoes of gunfire faded, Jeff found himself standing amongst piles of reptilian corpses. His soldiers were limping, some burnt and bleeding, but their eyes held a sense of achievement. They had won. Avalanche, fur matted with blood, both its own and the Kuldari's, sat amidst the carnage. "Good work, team," it said, as if it were complimenting a group of well-trained hounds. "How?" Jeff cleared his throat. He was a commander, not some terrified greenhorn. How did you know about the traps? The Kuldari rely too much on their technology. They're predictable. Avalanche's rumbling voice conveyed amusement. Your scientists make me like this. They assume all creatures think alike. That's their weakness. Jeff felt a chill run down his spine. The implications of those words were staggering. The scientists saw Avalanche as a tool, a weapon no different from a drone or a tank. But what if it was more than that? Ramirez! He snapped back to the task at hand. Get a comms team on the ridge. Re-establish contact with command. We've secured Firebase Echo. Yes, sir. But as Ramirez turned to leave, she paused and glanced nervously at Avalanche. Something wrong, Lieutenant? Jeff asked. It's just... She faltered. When the commander talks about this back home, can he maybe not mention the beast? Too many horror stories out there about these things. Jeff hesitated. There were stories, certainly. Rumors of Beastmasters going rogue, turning on their own ranks. Yet today, Avalanche had saved countless lives. We'll see, he said finally, then turned to the towering, blood-soaked creature. Avalanche, well done. I think we should get you cleaned up. The giant bear thing nodded, then looked directly at Ramirez. Tell the commander not to worry, Lieutenant. The horrors are only stories. For now. Jeff watched them walk away, the hulking beast and his young lieutenant, both battle-scarred and oddly alike in that moment. As he looked over the battlefield, all he could think about was what the victory had cost, and whether it was a price they could afford to keep paying. The captured Firebase Echo was a stark contrast to the harsh wilderness. Now held by human forces, it hummed with controlled chaos, technicians scurrying to re-establish comms, medics triaging the wounded, and soldiers stripping the dead for usable supplies. Jeff had commandeered a small office, less an office and more a glorified storage closet, for a debrief with Avalanche. The beast sat with unnerving stillness, its bulk taking up most of the cramped space. Its wounds were mostly superficial, already clotting and starting to scab over. High Command wants us deployed again immediately. Jeff started, trying to ignore the way those intelligent eyes studied his every move. The intel you helped us recover. There's a major Kuldari production facility not far from here. Taking it out will cripple their supply lines. Do we have time to rest? Repair? Avalanche's voice was surprisingly soft for a creature its size. Command assures us reinforcements are en route. Jeff's answer was half-truth, half-wishful thinking. The fleet was spread thin. The fact that he'd been given a Beastmaster at all was a desperate play. Our window is narrow. We strike within the next 48 hours. I see your kind hasn't changed. Avalanche exhaled, a puff of frost clouding the air. Always more to conquer. No time to mend wounds. The accusation stung. Jeff was well aware of humanity's relentless expansion, but they had few other choices. Resources were dwindling, and every habitable planet was a potential lifeline. We fight to survive, Avalanche, he said, a hint of steel in his voice. Do you, Commander? The beast rose, and for the first time Jeff realized its full height. It towered over him, a physical manifestation of the unease he'd felt since its arrival. Look at this war you started. Tell me, who is winning? The answer choked in his throat. They'd won skirmishes, gained ground, but they were losing the overall battle. The Kuldari were dug in, willing to die for every inch of this desolate ice ball. You're supposed to be a weapon, Jeff countered. Are you having second thoughts about your purpose? Avalanche stared down at him for a long, unsettling moment. Then it turned and walked to the single grimy window. Outside, wounded soldiers limped past, a depressing parade of the cost of war. I am not like those you sent to die in the trenches, the beast finally said. I was born on Earth. Before the gene splicing, the training, before they made me this. I remember green fields, not ice. Warm sun, not this unending storm. I remember packmates. A mother. Jeff recoiled at the image. He'd read the files, but the mental image of Avalanche as a bear cub was unsettling. I will fight, Avalanche said, turning back towards him. But there will come a day when I have to choose a side, mine or yours. Don't make it easy for me, Commander. Show me you're worth fighting for. Before Jeff could reply, Ramirez burst into the room, shattering the tension. Sir, urgent transmission from command. New orders have arrived. Whatever he'd been about to say to the creature before him died on his lips. He had a new mission. Whether he liked it or not, the war machine was grinding forward, and he was just one of its many cogs. "Report!" he barked, steeling himself for whichever new horror High Command had dreamed up. The new orders left a bitter taste in Jeff's mouth. Their target wasn't the Kuldari production facility, but a sprawling civilian settlement miles away. "Intel's picked up a new reading, Commander," Ramirez relayed, her voice flat. "A weapon. Bioengineering. Nasty stuff if their reports are true." Across the small holographic display, the image of a Kuldari settlement shimmered into existence. It wasn't a military compound, but a network of crude dwellings and greenhouses dug into the permafrost. They'd seen these before. Refugee camps where Kuldari women, children, and the elderly huddled for warmth while their warriors fought to preserve their species. "What kind of weapon are we talking about?" Jeff asked, dreading the answer. "Ecological, sir. Designed to terraform aggressively." She met his gaze unflinchingly. They both knew what that meant. "This planet's already barely habitable," he muttered. "Command wants us to finish the job?" "Looks like it," Ramirez grimaced. "Orders are to clear the area, ensure nothing remains alive." Avalanche, silent until this point, rumbled. "Humans and their weapons of last resort. You are unimaginative in your cruelty, Commander." Jeff bristled. "You haven't seen cruelty, beast. You're a pampered lab experiment compared to what the Kuldari do to captured prisoners." He recalled the mutilated bodies they'd found during the canyon ambush, evidence of the enemy's brutal desperation. "The fact that you know cruelty firsthand does not justify creating more," Avalanche retorted. "These are civilians, cubs, if you prefer that term." "I don't make the decisions," Jeff snapped back, frustrated anger bubbling up. "I follow them. That's how armies work. That's how survival works." The beast tilted its massive head. "I disagree, Commander. That is how extinction works." Jeff slammed his fist on the flimsy desk. "Listen, Furball. Don't get idealistic on me. It was the Kuldari who invaded first. They started this war." He stabbed at the hologram, the image of the settlement flickering. "This ends it. One strike and it's over. One strike and their planet becomes uninhabitable. You force them to fight for another rock, spread the war across the sector." Avalanche paced the length of the small room, barely fitting inside. "Your kind breeds conflict like rabbits." "This is our best chance to cripple them," Jeff retorted. "Without a home base, they become scattered refugees easy to hunt down." The silence in the room was thick enough to cut. Ramirez averted her eyes, clearly trying to remain neutral. "Jeff, sir," Avalanche's voice was almost gentle. "This weapon, it's not a defense. It's a suicide note, and you're the one signing it." Jeff stared at the hologram, a chilling realization dawning on him. The Kuldari, in their desperation, had created something horrific, a way to force their enemy off-planet at the cost of poisoning their own meager refuge. It was the logic of a cornered animal, and the humans had unwittingly become part of their monstrous gamble. "Command expects a decision, sir," Ramirez prompted, breaking the tension. He was out of time, out of options. Soldiers would live or die based on his next words, and somewhere amidst the bloodshed he had to find the tattered shreds of his own humanity. "Prep my gear," Jeff said, his voice low and strained, "and find me some transport. I'm taking this decision up the chain of command." Ramirez blinked, surprised. "Sir? Are you sure that's wise? Questioning orders like this?" "I'm not questioning orders," Jeff cut her off. "I'm invoking my right as a field commander to consult directly with HQ." He knew it was a thin thread to hang on to, but he desperately needed to stall, to buy time and figure out what the hell he was going to do. "An avalanche?" Ramirez hesitated. "It's best not to keep them waiting." He eyed the beast warily. Avalanche seemed content to observe for now, its massive form coiled in the corner, eyes half-lidded. "Give him the same orders. I want the brass seeing that thing firsthand when I make my case." The transport was a cramped gunship, barely large enough to accommodate them. Avalanche hunched inside, dwarfing Jeff and the two uneasy Marines tasked with escorting them. "I must admit," the beast rumbled, breaking the tense silence, "I'm impressed, Commander. Most of your kind would have obeyed without thought. Most of my kind don't get attached to their weapons, Jeff shot back. Avalanche chuckled, a deep, unsettling sound within the confines of the gunship. Perhaps. But you are realizing something important. Weapons have a nasty habit of talking back. The command ship was an entirely different world. Sleek corridors, the sterile hum of filtered air, and the crisp uniforms of staff who'd never seen a real battlefield. They're not expecting this, Ramirez whispered as they disembarked. That's the point, Jeff said grimly. He hoped. They were ushered into a Spartan conference room where a holographic projection of General Thorne, his face set in a permanent scowl, dominated the space. Commander Ward, I commend your initiative, Thorne began, his tone clipped. However, time is of the essence. Report on the weapons status and your deployment plan. Jeff took a step forward, Avalanche looming behind him like a silent, furry omen. Sir, I must formally object to the operation. The holographic general blinked, the image flickering slightly in surprise. Objections will be noted after the mission, Commander. I expect detailed reasoning. With respect, General, Jeff pressed on. This isn't a viable target, it's a civilian center. He spared a glance at Ramirez, who gave a subtle nod, activating a datapad linked to the room's systems. Enlarged images of the Kuldari settlement filled the space, showing crude, ice-covered dwellings, makeshift greenhouses, and clusters of reptilian civilians huddling for warmth. Our intel is clear, Thorne growled. They are developing a weapon. A weapon they're willing to use on themselves, sir, Jeff interrupted. It's the ecological equivalent of a scorched earth policy. They'd rather poison their own planet than surrender to us. A testament to their desperation, Thorne's voice boomed. It renders them more dangerous, not less. Or it renders us the monsters, Jeff retorted, matching his superior's intensity. This isn't war anymore, sir. It's genocide. Avalanche rumbled, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. Genocide is the logical conclusion of your expansion, Commander. Congratulations. You're starting to understand. Thorne's hologram glared at the creature, then fixed a hard stare on Jeff. This is a war zone, Commander, not a philosophy seminar. Are you refusing orders? I'm asking you to reconsider, Jeff said, his voice strained. This fight, it needs to end. But not like this. The silence stretched painfully. The minutes ticked on as Thorne's expression shifted from anger to cold contemplation. Explain, Thorne finally said, his voice dangerously low. And so, amidst the sterile confines of the command ship, high above a frozen wasteland, a soldier and a beast tried to explain the true horrors of war. Tried to make a distant general understand that victory came with a price, and sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play. Thorne listened, his holographic image flickering occasionally as if his own confidence was wavering. It was a long, tense hour of arguments, data projections, and grim anecdotes from the trenches. Ramirez presented alternative recon scans showing no evidence of conventional weapon manufacturing at the settlement, while Jeff painted a picture of a Kuldari population pushed to the absolute brink. And through it all, Avalanche sat in imposing silence, its mere presence a chilling reminder of humanity's capacity for monstrous innovation. When it was over, Thorne's expression had softened, though not with sentimentality. It was the hardened calculation of a man who'd seen far too many wars. Very well, Commander, he finally said, his voice gruff but even. You've made your case. The operation is suspended pending further strategic analysis. It was far from a resounding victory, but it bought them time. Jeff exhaled, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. However, Thorne continued, do not mistake this for a change of heart. The Kuldari remain a threat, and the Beastmasters are still a vital resource. His gaze flicked towards Avalanche, who regarded him with an unnerving calmness. We simply need to find more appropriate uses for them. The implication hung heavy in the air. More skirmishes, more targeted strikes. The war machine would lumber on, its gears grinding ever more ruthlessly. Jeff glanced at Avalanche and saw a flicker of something cold and ancient in the creature's eyes. And my objections, sir? Jeff asked, his tone flat. Thorne shrugged, a chillingly pragmatic gesture. Noted, Commander. Duly noted. We may yet find ourselves in situations where scruples become a luxury we cannot afford. It was a dismissal, wrapped in military euphemisms, but a dismissal nonetheless, and the unspoken words echoed louder than any order. This battle was won, but the war was far from over. Worse, the war was changing them all. The return trip to Firebase Echo was somber. Avalanche remained eerily silent, its usual sharp observations replaced by a brooding stillness. Jeff found no comfort in the reprieve. He'd witnessed firsthand the potential for cruelty within the ranks, the cold calculations made in the name of strategy. As their gunship descended into the swirling ice storms, he couldn't shake the feeling that the lines had blurred, between human and beast, between soldier and monster. Back at the base, soldiers greeted them with a mixture of cautious respect and lingering fear. Rumors spread like wildfire in these isolated outposts. Jeff had faced down his superiors, had dared to speak for the enemy, and walked away with his command intact. But the looks he received weren't those of a hero. They were the wary stares reserved for someone capable of unpredictable things, someone perhaps infected by the same wildness they saw in the creature at his side. Avalanche, as always, was enigmatic. "You did well, Commander," the beast rumbled at one point, startling him. "Today, you fought on the right side, but wars are fickle things. We shall see where your courage leads tomorrow." It wasn't praise. It was a challenge, a stark reminder that loyalty could be tested and allegiances could shift. As he surveyed the battered camp, the weary troops, and the endless icy wasteland beyond, Jeff realized the hardest battle was yet to come. It wasn't against the Kuldari, but a fight against the darkness they were all capable of harboring. The Kuldari bioweapon remained a lingering threat. The orders from high command might change at any moment. And somewhere within him a cold knot of doubt festered. Had he made the right choice? The fate of countless lives, human and Kuldari alike, hung in the balance. And standing beside a creature born of science and savagery, Jeff knew the line between survival and damnation was becoming terrifyingly thin. Days turned into a grueling stalemate. The Kuldari, perhaps sensing hesitation in the human forces, held their lines, entrenching themselves further. Smaller skirmishes broke out, brutal and pointless, claiming lives on both sides. Jeff's reports to high command became terse updates, devoid of the usual optimism. The truth was, morale was at an all-time low. His soldiers weren't afraid of the enemy anymore. They were afraid of what came next. Requests for reinforcements were met with promises that never materialized. The noose was tightening, not around the Kuldari, but around Firebase Echo. And through it all, Avalanche remained an unsettling presence, a constant reminder of the monstrous acts committed in the name of progress. Then, a transmission shattered the bleak monotony. It wasn't from high command, but a scrambled Kuldari broadcast, picked up by a long-range comms tech bored enough to try and decipher it. Jeff was summoned to the makeshift comms shack, where the tech nervously played the recording. The voice that crackled from the speakers was raspy, filled with the hissing diction of the Kuldari language. Translated, it carried a startling message. "Human Commander," the voice began. "We know of your defiance, your objection to the destruction of civilians. We have seen the beast you fight beside." Jeff felt ice in his veins. The Kuldari had known somehow. They were watching and they were reaching out. "We offer a parley," the voice continued. "Unarmed, unescorted, a chance to speak, not fight. Your beast has shown us there is another path." Whispers broke out among the gathered officers. A Kuldari parley was unthinkable, a trap certainly, yet the desperation in their voice was chillingly genuine. "This is suicide, sir," Ramirez said, voicing everyone's fear. "Or the only way to break the deadlock," Jeff countered, his mind racing. Silence fell upon the room, punctuated only by the static from the speakers. Everyone stared at him, awaiting his decision. "Send a return transmission," he finally ordered. "Tell them I accept. Designate a neutral zone equidistant from our lines." There was a collective gasp, but no one dared to argue. Jeff had pulled rank once. He wouldn't hesitate to do it again. "And prepare Avalanche," he added, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm going to need backup on this one." The neutral zone was a stretch of wind-swept, featureless ice. No natural cover, no escape routes. Jeff stood alone, bundled against the cold, acutely aware of every distant creak and groan of the shifting glaciers. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a desperate, foolish hope. He'd left Avalanche behind on strict orders. The beast's presence would be seen as provocation, or worse, a sign of weakness. This gamble had to be his alone. A figure emerged from the swirling snow, reptilian scales gleaming dully in the pale light. The scaled Kuldari warrior carried no visible weapon, a gesture of trust that bordered on the absurd. It stopped a few paces short of Jeff, hissing something in its guttural language. "I speak for the commander," a translator drone, hastily attached to its armor, rasped out the words. "Then let's speak," Jeff replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Tell your leaders this war is pointless. We can both still walk away from this." The Kuldari tilted its head, a gesture unnervingly human for a reptilian creature. "Walk away? You invaded our homes, killed our young? You offer peace after near genocide?" "It wasn't my decision." Jeff felt his defensiveness crumble. He was part of it, the invading force, regardless of his personal objections. "But you obeyed," the Kuldari hissed. "You and the beast. Your kind only understands strength, which makes us the same." The words struck a nerve. They were right. Too right. "It doesn't have to be," he countered weakly. "Your bioweapon." The Kuldari leaned in closer. "You refuse to use it, yet you possess it. We have one as well, one we will use, and then your precious Earth will be as dead as our homeworld." A wave of icy dread washed over Jeff. "I didn't know." "Now you do." The Kuldari warrior stood its full height, a display of reptilian defiance. "We end this. Together. Today." Before Jeff could parse those words, the Kuldari lunged. Its claws, meant only for digging into the frozen ground, were aimed at his throat. Time seemed to slow as instinct took over. Jeff wasn't a frontline grunt anymore, but years of battlefield reflexes kicked in. He twisted, the Kuldari's claws slashing across his chest, the protective layers of his suit tearing under the razor-sharp onslaught. He cried out more in surprise than pain. The Kuldari pressed its advantage, its reptilian eyes burning with a mix of desperation and a savage, primal fury. This wasn't a negotiated truce, it was an execution. Then, a blur of white crashed into them both. Avalanche barreled into the fray, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. The Kuldari screeched, thrown back by the sheer force of the impact. It scrambled to its feet, eyes wide in terror, staring not at Jeff, but at the towering beast that now protected him. "Run, Commander!" Avalanche's voice boomed through the swirling snow. "Warn your kind!" Jeff hesitated for a split second, then turned and fled. He heard the Kuldari warrior's death throes echoing behind him. A guttural hiss abruptly cut short. It was a brutal sound, a horrifying reminder of the fine line between life and death, between negotiation and savagery. He burst back into Firebase Echo, breathless and bleeding, soldiers startled at the sight of their commander, his uniform ripped and spattered with crimson. "They know!" he gasped out, doubling over as pain flared in his chest. "The Kuldari, they know about the weapon. They have their own... They're willing to use it." The base exploded into frantic activity. Medics rushed towards him, but he swatted them away. He had to relay the message. "Ramirez," he barked, spotting his lieutenant in the controlled chaos. "Get me a direct line to command. Now." Moments later, he found himself back in that sterile conference room, Thorne's holographic projection crackling into existence with an impatient frown. "Commander Ward, report?" "Sir, the truce was a trap. The Kuldari, they know we have a bioweapon, and they have one too. They're desperate, sir. They intend to use it." Jeff spat blood onto the floor, ignoring the alarmed shouts from medical staff hovering nearby. Thorne stared at him, disbelief warring with fury on his face. "Are you absolutely certain, Commander?" "They attacked," Jeff spat. "They were going to kill me, to send a message." He could still see the feral hatred in the Kuldari's eyes. Silence descended upon the room. The officers around him shifted uneasily, the implications of Jeff's words hanging in the charged air. "This changes everything," Thorne finally said, his voice low and strained. "We were debating how to use the weapon. Now, it seems the question is whether we will survive its use by the enemy." He looked at Jeff, a haunted expression in his eyes. "Return to your base, Commander. Secure the weapon. Prepare for immediate deployment." His eyes flicked to the corner of the room where Avalanche loomed, a silent, monstrous sentinel. "And the Beastmaster unit." The holographic image blinked out, leaving Jeff standing there, the weight of an impossible decision crushing him. The Kuldari had revealed their hand, and in doing so had forced humanity to do the same. The war had escalated, the stakes raised to a terrifying new level. He staggered out of the room, Avalanche lumbering behind him. "You were right," Jeff managed, his voice hoarse. "Turns out we're the same as the Kuldari. Both sides have their monsters." Avalanche said nothing, but its eyes seemed to pierce through him, an unnerving mixture of pity and a strange, primal satisfaction. As they walked through the base, whispers and stares followed them. There was a new fear in the eyes of his soldiers. It wasn't the fear of the enemy, or even the fear of dying. It was the fear of what their own side had become, of the cold calculations made in the name of survival. The fear that they might be fighting for a future where there were no winners, only the monstrous echoes of choices they dared not regret.